Hello and welcome to another edition of Fides Podcast. My name is Jerry Serino and I'm your host, and I'm here with talent on loan from Rush. We have been talking about indoctrination recently on the Fides show and love to talk about it. Sad that we have to talk about it, but unfortunately we know it has been going on. A recent guest, if you've hopefully listened to the episode with Annabella Rockwell, she is the student, the young woman who was indoctrinated in college and then had to be deprogrammed with the help of her mother. Thank God. And I am with great pleasure am here with her mother, Melinda Rockwell, to talk about her things from her perspective, and also talk about what else is going on at the even younger, sadly younger educational levels. So Melinda, thank you for joining me.
Jerry, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for having Annabella before. We thank you for what you're doing.
Yeah, well, thank you for what you're doing. I mean, I'm just a silly guy on a podcast, and you're literally out there fighting this fight that has gotten quite worse. You know, it's bad enough when a college student who is an adult has to deal with the craziness and indoctrination that they get in college. It's wrong, it's bad, it's not good. You had to deal with it as a mom. But we're also, getting this from kindergartners that are being indoctrinated and put forward all sorts of craziness. And so we'll talk about that in a minute. But I want to start with, so the story of Annabella, your daughter, goes a wonderful young woman, goes off to college happy and comes out, hating the world. White people are the worst. Mom's oppressive and so on. America sucks. And you had to deprogram it. So tell me from your perspective, when did you first start seeing and what were the signs that you went, uh-oh, things aren't right here?
Well, I saw what the people around her were like, what the school was like, but I felt that she had a boyfriend that was visiting her on the weekends. So I figured, she was away on the weekends and they could only get so close. And that only went so far because a sophomore year, her friends started saying, we don't like your boyfriend. We don't like him. He's stupid. We don't want him here. He's not allowed to stay in the dorm. We won't have him. So little by little, they chipped away from the one strong connection that she'd had. And this was a young man that she'd grown up with and they'd seen each other for a few years, who was from her background, had everything in common with her. And by that third year, of course, I knew signs. Nobody wants to imagine it could happen because when I sent her off to school, when I raised her, I had two objectives of raising a child. It wasn't to be a Wall Street genius. It was to be drug-free and anorexia-free because I'd grown up with that around me and my family. So those are the two goals. I didn't worry about woke-free at that point. But things were, she would say things to me in a way that was, they're saying this and what do you, and what do you think? But the very questions that she was even repeating these questions, I knew something was wrong. But then she turned to me and said, are you still buying into all this Jesus Christ stuff? And we're hardly holy rollers, but she was given a faith as a base so that we could avoid anorexia and drug addiction. And she'd have it, just this is what you do. You raise your family that way. And I thought, wow, that's a pretty big statement. I would never have said, even when I was completely in my anti-organized religious stage, I would never have said that. Then I knew there was a problem. So, then eventually it got to, by the senior year, she wouldn't come home without a handler. So they would send the best looking, more appropriate looking handler just to make sure that Annabella was buffered from her family. And couldn't get her alone, couldn't watch a television show, couldn't go to a dinner. There was always somebody right there.
What do you mean a handler? Like who?
Well, instead of bringing a friend home that you have everything in common with, this was somebody who was going to keep you straight so the parents couldn't get into them. So when Annabella was saying things like, you're so oppressed, Mom, you don't even realize how oppressed you are. Women couldn't have bank accounts until the 1970s. They couldn't have credit cards without their husbands signing, which was, if the woman was not the main bread owner, the husband, who was the spouse that earned the money, had to give permission because you were running up his credit. It sort of makes sense. But she would say these things to me, and I'd been a single mother. Her father was very much around, but I'd done everything on my own. My mother who was legally married, was single for 50 years or something. So it's not like she was raised in a patriarchy. She was raised with women around her. It was preposterous. But anytime I could say something against that, she had somebody there that I didn't know well. It wasn't an old friend, it was a new friend. So you couldn't have the conversation in front of the stranger. It was meant to keep everything light and just go through the bare minimum.
Would she bring them home as a protector, or would they? It almost sounds like they were, insisted, or they were assigned to someone or something like that. How did that work?
It's true, because most of her friends, and I will say these were a group, most of them were very privileged at going to private schools. And most of them, they had a little prestige around them. So they had a way with her, and she was, they were the group. So if they suggested, hey, you're going home to fight our battle for us, maybe you should bring somebody with you. I don't think that it was ever a thought that Annabella would bring somebody home that didn't know her friends at home. It makes no sense. But it was a good idea because it would keep her, in the social justice warrior mode. And, she had an ally. But she wouldn't send home the most militant. She'd send the ones that looked sort of normal, but you knew they weren't because, because they just weren't. But they kept it very careful. They were quiet they were close with their cards.
Yeah. Okay. So we know from Annabella's story, and if you're listening to this episode and you didn't hear Annabella's and you want to get her full perspective, please listen to that episode. So you obviously are famous now.
I don't know that.
Well, or infamous, depending on who we're talking to, for seeing this problem. And, they're saying, I don't know if you use the word deprogramming, but, trying to pull your daughter in this case, away from that indoctrination and that horrible thinking. In just a nutshell, how did you do that?
Well, I want to say that there are a couple things I want to make sure. Number one, there is an entire world that will tell you if you love your adult child or your college child or your younger child, that you're a Karen, you're a helicopter mom. Helicopter mom was a term that I first noticed in 2007 when I sent her off to a boarding school, which was my school. And it's clicking now. It was made to make us foolish, concerned parents that love their children, concerned and want to be in their lives. We're meant to look like fools. So you're going to go up against those people. But I had, because of the anorexia, my first cousin had tremendous anorexia growing up, and then she ended up going to a cult. And I lived through this, not to mention some drugs along the way, but I was able to recognize them. And I had been in a theater that had, it turns out it was run by cult people. So it's a fine line between what is a child that's growing up and learning about life and becoming into her own, and what is absolute indoctrination. So you keep slapping yourself going, no, that's not happening. It's not happening. But ultimately, what's going on. And it's if your child was getting on drugs, the family would do something about it. You'd get together, which we did. This was a family thing. We all got involved with this. But with drugs or alcohol, you've got some time when they're sobering up that maybe you can get through to them and do an intervention. But with this sort of indoctrination, it's very difficult. If you go too close to them, if I arrive, at one point she asked me to move to get a rental in Massachusetts just to be there during the winter. And I was very, first of all, I don't want to be in the cold in the winter. So I had a reason. I definitely didn't want to go. But if I'd gone there and the friends were there, then I'd look like the freakish helicopter crazy lady, because I was there with my 22-year-old daughter at the campus. But she was the one that reached out. So what I tell the parents, it's a chess game, and only you know really how to do it. I'd had a lot of experience by dealing with my first cousin, again, with the drugs, with the anorexia, but, validating, if with the anorexia, same thing like with these new ideas, the newfangled wokeism. If we told my cousin, oh, you're right, you're really fat. She was 65 pounds when she was admitted to the hospital. So it is a chess game. Anything you do, if you think you've made a breakthrough with, she's calling me, she really wants me, it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And I speak to parents every day much of the day about their individual situations. And the moms get so excited because the child texted them. And you can't get excited because this is a really long-term thing. With the cult, and there are many cult people, and I want to say cult and deprogrammers, there are many charlatans, there are many people that will take your money, and it's a hard find, to find the right people. Anybody that can email me or something, I'm happy to give them some names that I trust and that I'm handing out to them. But there are legalities involved. You're not really meant to deprogram because is that conversion therapy. So it's really almost for the help for the parents. But I had a whole crew of people, wherever Annabella was, that she wouldn't speak to the family, but she might speak to a godparent. She, would call them, and they knew what to say, and they didn't make a move without clearing it through me, except for one person who married an old friend, and she was right there to help, Annabella go on her life and never see her family again. And, that friendship, I still speak to the husband, but that is over because everybody knew how serious it was. They knew her. And, but it is a chess game, and it's no different than getting somebody off of alcohol, except you don't have the morning with a hangover. You can grab the person,
Yeah. That's a great way of putting it. I agree. So much of this wokeness is we simply celebrate a person and just say, well, that's just how they are, or that's just what they think, and let's just maybe roll our eyes but be proud of them for their independence or whatever the case may be. And when in reality, we would never congratulate or encourage someone to be an alcoholic. We would never. Your example of anorexia, we would never say, well, congratulations, good for you, right? We would recognize that it's a problem and we would help them. And that's the loving thing to do for them. And that's certainly what you did for Annabella. And, again, having had her on my show, and I've, communicated with her before and after, really a wonderful person. And I'm so glad that she's been saved is maybe the best way to put it. And certainly through your help and your love. And that is fantastic. So
a big team. I want to remind a big team. Scott Williams, her tennis coach, who's quite an important, famous man who dropped everything to get involved in email and all. But I will say one thing: I could have been wrong. I could have been wrong. Maybe she was just becoming of age. But at 30 years old and a couple of years before, she says, "Thank you for not giving up on me." So then that makes it worth it, because the life that she's living now, I believe, is the life that she wanted, that she was, that she'd always planned on. She's back there, and she's got the light in her again. She was miserable and dark and maudlin and depressed the whole other time. So.
Yep. Yeah. And absolutely. And it's again, that's why we need to help rather than encourage all this woke behavior. So obviously, again, as I mentioned in the beginning, it's a horrible shame and experience when a college student, an adult, has to face this and then consequently has to deal with overcoming it. And hopefully they can. Annabella's case, she did overcome it with your help. There are certainly plenty of cases where they don't. We are seeing now this type of behavior happening as young as we can possibly expect, i.e., kindergarten, preschool. We know that this is happening. It's not a guess. It's not an opinion. We see it. We know, we see in the news and in media of these kindergarten teachers or these drag queen shows or kids being told, have you decided your gender yet? And that kind of thing too. Or certainly, transitioning and hormone blockers for children and the like. That would scare, as scary as Annabella's situation was, it has to be even scarier for a parent of a first grader. What is your experience with that?
Well, that's a very good question, and I'm going to give some specifics of a specific state, and I also want to point out, I'm from New York City. I was underage, but I danced at Studio 54, and I danced with drag queens. And when I was young in my 20s, I hung out on the Lower East Side. I went to the drag bars, the Pyramid Club. I am no prude. However, we went to their area, which was a grown-up bohemian center where everybody, we enjoyed it. And I will say, the drag queens of the 80s were not sexualized in that way. They wanted to be pretty. I hired one. There was a show I was working on, a Broadway show called Alcazar de Paris at the New Academy Theater. And I hired Crisis, who at that point, the late 80s, I think it was about 89, was a famous, beautiful drag queen. Absolutely beautiful, looked like Margot Hemingway. But it wasn't dirty. They wanted to be pretty and sing. They sang their own songs, most of them. And it was all about makeup and glam and fun. This is a different sexualized thing. But I'd like to say that that it's a horrific thing and the parents are up in arms, but they're not. They're not. There's a significant amount that isn't. Now, the specifics, I'm going to talk about New York City, if you give me a moment, because one of the problems is, particularly about the private schools, because the private schools, which the people are not even aware of, they were taken over in 2019 by the New York public school regents. The regent seized control of all the private and religious schools on a 130-year-old law that said that those schools had to be substantially equivalent to the public schools. So the Hasidic schools in Brooklyn, which coincidentally were not vaccinating their children, they had a couple of measles outbreaks. So this was as I see it, the ploy to seize control. And they claimed that the Hasidics were not getting the best history. It was not substantially equivalent. So in April of 2019, the regent seized control. The New York Association of Independent Schools, NICEAS, sued, and all they were given was the right to have a hearing between July 3rd and Labor Day. So I went up and down. I have a summer beach that I go to, and I grabbed everybody, please write the letters. That it was a fait accompli. Some schools, some didn't even write their schools or alumni to tell them what had happened because they were waiting to see on the fence, or they knew it was going to happen. So this basically when you think of the New York City private schools, you're thinking of those important and rich and powerful people in the entire world who are on the board. The money, the power, the hedge funders, it's not to be believed. But it technically and I can send you another on the letter from one school. It put them above the board of these powerful people. So it was official this last September, but it still was never announced, and people don't understand what happened. It blanketed, all the schools have the same agenda. They put in the Gleason, GLSEN, the gay, lesbian, can't forget the rest of it, but it was the group founded by Obama's school czar, who also was a proponent of NAMBLA. He said NAMBLA, Man Boy Love, was really not so bad. Mm-hmm. And it's backed by JP Morgan, Citibank, the most powerful corporations. And they put it in all these schools, in all the private schools, as well as the public, but I'm talking specifically about the private, so you see how large this takeover is. Along with that, they sent out emails to find out exactly where every single computer in your house was. And the parents answered if it was a computer, if it was a wireless, who had access, claiming that, not everybody had the money to have a computers. This is absolute garbage. They installed OWL in most of the classrooms, I believe all of them, and because of the COVID, as they say, and it collects all the information and goes to Albany. Now you have the sexualization goes hand in hand with the fact that they put in 3 therapists in all the schools that are at least K through 12. So when the children come into school, the same as the American Pediatrics has, I believe it's 3 years old, the doctors start saying, "Hello, dear, are you a boy or a girl?" Which immediately puts doubt. If you hear it every time you see these therapists, which is no business, these people can afford any kind of therapist they want. Suddenly you have these random therapists installed in these traditional 100-year-old schools. And the first thing they're doing is saying, maybe it's not that you're mad at this, or maybe you're not really a girl. So in the girls' school, one of our family schools, that this was going on. By the time 7th grade rolled around, there were 7 girls in the traditional, it's actually the Gossip Girl school where the girl wrote it, 7 girls identifying as boys in this girls' school that were during puberty, your most delicate time, and they're being encouraged. The families are terrified that they're going to lose their children, but also at the same time, they're so convinced that that's woke, that's wonderful. So the Sunday school that was my church, Annabella's church, our family church, Kristen married, confirmed married, and everybody there is forced to call a little girl whose name is just a little girl's name. And now we'll call her Bob. And everybody is forced to go into this lie. They're telling the anorexic she's fat. And the parents are willy-nilly going along with it because they think they're cool and they're woke. And if you don't belong in it anyway, you will be ostracized. And it's the way Antifa, they don't just go after you, they will go after your siblings' businesses, everybody in your family's businesses. So people are terrorized. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is that there is a chic to this. The kids are finding themselves getting popular from this gender thing. Now, the irony is, a friend of Annabella's that she grew up with, I just saw her this weekend, and she was bragging. I'm very proud for her. She's working with the UN, this new program. She's 30, and she's going to stop female genital mutilation in Africa and solve hunger. Yet when I mentioned something about, sexual reassignment surgery for children, she's all for it. So these are educated people. The irony, it's okay to cut off a little child's genitals in America, but you're going to go save the Africans from their culture of the female genital mutilation while you're solving hunger. And I finally said, okay, that's very good of you. You're a social justice warrior. Now, do you know what Agenda 30 is? And no. I'm like, well, it's in the UN. Look it up. I'm doing STZ or something. I said, well, look it up and look who signed it. It's George Herbert Walker Bush. You think he's a good guy? Oh, he's horrible. And I said, well, so what you're doing from the goodness of your heart is wonderful, but just try and look into who set it up, why are you doing it, and can you trust the outcome? Maybe you can. Oh, of course I can. I said, you know what? Just be in there as a spy. I'll send you some things, but they're completely convinced. And there is only, now let me tell you, Dana Kennedy, who writes for the Post, who did Annabella's story, and I have been feeding her things because nobody with a child will put their name on anything. They don't want their email on. And in the 3 years that she's been uncovering, the visual cartoons of how to, I can't even say it, play with oneself for 6-year-olds that's in the private schools. Since she's been uncovering it, she had one person go on record. One. She has spoken to over 1,000 people. One, and that's Andrew Gutman, who was the father who wrote Brarely, the Brarely letter, and said that he did not want to, he thought it was outrageous that they would force the parents to take CRT classes, etc. And then, of course, he had to move his child out of the school. And now he's running for Congress against Lois Frankel in Palm Beach County. And I've met him, I've had time with him and his wife, and I'm so impressed with him, so proud. And he's the one man, because again, it's the power of these schools. I'm rambling here, but I went to these. I went to the Hewitt School. I was my mother went there, my grandmother, my whole family, and Annabella went there. And by going to these prestigious schools, which it's more important than having money, you find a way. If you can, you do anything to do it. Because I never had to show a resume in my life. The power of the connections is worth everything. So the parents that are there now are willing to sacrifice their children with this gender bender stuff, all for whether it's not the connections, the power, or the name, or the fear that they're going to be blackballed and canceled. And they will be, no question, they will be. And called racist, of course. Of course, it's racist.
Yeah. Well, everybody's racist. If you're not on the woke side of things, you're racist, even if the stance you're taking has nothing to do with race. It seems like that's the universal word. Yeah, that was you went on for a while, and I didn't want to stop you because it's really, I couldn't stop listening at all these things that are going on that, quite frankly, yes, it's in New York. I'm here in Ohio. We are a little bit better, but any state is one election away from being California or New York and facing these challenges to where they take away your rights, where you were talking about how they basically took control of the private schools. And, there ends up being no safe space. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. So
go ahead. I don't want to say about Ohio, now again, the public schools, Randy Weingarten, childless Randy Weingarten, she's got her own thing. And it's funny because they never had a vax mandate for the children in the public schools in New York. The parents couldn't come into the schools, but they didn't have it for the children. the National Association for Independent Schools used to be something like more like the Independent Schools Association in Washington. This new one, which if you trace the president right out of BLM and all that, it is deadly dangerous. So any private school in Ohio, Shaker Heights, or whatever the fancy places are, they're all under this. So take a look at it and see what's going on. Also, this SEL, which is the cell, which has also been put in all the schools. And that is a very, very serious problem. And that is banked, it's really was formed out of Yale School. The president of Yale wrote the book on that. And now there's the Yale School of Emotional Intelligence. Go figure. It's pretty scary. But the president wrote this book on SEL. Chicago has the Collaborative Association of Social Emotional Learning, CASEL. And if you haven't seen it, it's worth taking a look at the board because it is frightening. And you see how serious this is, how deep it is. Of course, it's Chan Zuckerberg. Some states you still can homeschool. The one that was the best that I found was Calvert, and they're very traditional. And they will tell you certain counties won't allow it. So these loopholes. But one more thing I want to say about the medical is that New York sent out New York Hospital Cornell said that Cornell, and I could also send you this. If your child is 12 years old and over, we will not be communicating with the parent anymore. We will be dealing directly with the child. We need their direct email. So the parent has been cut out because the children 12 and over in the state of New York have been given certain rights for mental health medicine choices. But of course, this is saying they want total communication. California is about to fall with medical emancipation. And Illinois, I think, right there. Anyway, so that's the other thing. So no matter what the schools have, we have to pay attention to those medical emancipation or the fine lines about them choosing their drugs. New Jersey just lost the right to for parents to be informed about their children being transgender in a school. They can leave in a boy-girl outfit, leave their home, go to school, change out of their clothes, and the school will completely hide their truth for people under 18. So they're complicit in the destruction of a minor.
They absolutely are. And you had mentioned NAMBLA earlier, and for those that don't know, that's the National Association for Man-Boy Lovers. And we have heard even prominent people talking about, they're calling them MAPS, minor attracted persons. They're minimizing molestation. What they're doing right now with all these children, they're basically grooming them. Anyone who thinks, especially after what you said about hiding the information for 12-year-olds and the like, this is not the end all for them. That's not like they're going to say that's as far as we're going to go and we'll leave it at that. That is far from it. They are going to go as far as possible in all of these woke areas. And so we can't just say, and I know I've been guilty of it, I'm sure we all have, where we say, well, all right, that's fine, let that happen. And then they keep, as they say, if you give them an inch, they'll take a foot. And that's what's going to happen. That's why we have to fight. So if you're watching this episode and not just listening, I'm scrolling the rockwellfoundation.org website at the bottom of the screen. If you're just listening, it's an easy one to remember, rockwellfoundation.org. And that's where you can go to find out, how you can be involved or get support and all this information. And anything you'd like to add to the website or about the website, Melinda?
Well, it's more the website's in the works because I'm trying to be very careful about, in some ways, calling attention to things. So I literally speak to anybody that calls or reaches out. I will find the time to speak to them. And I will make sure to give them the information. I will put them in touch with other parents. There's, we're always, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a lawyer, so we make sure to say that. But there is a very, very sad group of parents out there, and unfortunately, they're calling now younger children. I do encourage you to take a look at Beth Penske's story. It was in the Post by Dana Kennedy, and she's a parent who's lost her, they're in their mid-20s. But what the problem was, again, at that age, the children started feeling lost, and they found, and the mom paid for the therapy. And once they got, and the therapists were younger, were about 26 years old. And it just seems that the one thing in common now are these therapists. It's not the old timers or older ones. They all seem to be young kids that know everything about everything. They got it all down pat. And the main thing is cut your parents off, ghost your parents, and get rid of the family. It's I went to the Soviet Union when I was young. I went to all the communist countries just about for 5 weeks at a clip, and I can't say that anything's different. And a lot of this came out of Chicago. Bill Ayers getting people like Linda Darling Hammond into the Columbia University teachers. So this is not an accident. It's all by design, and it's frightening. But I'm happy to speak to everybody one-on-one and put them in touch with the right people. If there's a deprogrammer, I'm happy to put them in touch with a couple of people that I trust. So, but thank you so much for what you're doing.
Yeah, no, thank you. And you had mentioned Beth Pensky. I had Beth on. I had the chance to meet with her and interview her. So her episode will be ultimately is on my show as well. Really a wonderful person, and yeah, sad story, very sad story as well. So you got to pay attention to this stuff because it's very, very, very real. It's not just something you hear about. You heard about somebody that had this experience. This is everywhere we go. And thank you, Melinda, for what you've done, what you're continuing to do. Please, anyone, reach out to Melinda Rockwell if you need guidance in this area, because she's fought the fight and she's continuing to fight. So, Melinda, thank you so much for coming on.
Gary, thank you so much for everything you do. Thank you. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Again, it's all you and people like you who get the credit. But thank all of you for listening to this episode of Fides Podcast. Please check out all my podcasts and all the different podcast apps on YouTube, Rumble, on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern on rightamericamedia.com and on WHKradio/podcasts.com as well. So thank you again for listening, and we'll see you next time.